Hello, mostly male audience. Welcome to the lands of Ilnore, from the royalty of the elves, to the human traders, to the bloody politics of the orcish tribes. This land was ripe with opportunity, but also with danger. We start our journey in the Shik state. Them and their neighbors, the Hissy Kingdom, had not been getting along recently. So, they did what any human does when they don't get along. They declared war. An invasion by the Shik state on the first day of the war marked the biggest casualties the war would see. They began a full-scale invasion, occupying and eliminating both the king and his second-in-command. The few remaining defenders did not stand a chance, as they were quickly killed. After a bit more cleanup, the Shik state was taken over. The Dopu Imperium and Holy Colonna, seeing this huge act of aggression, decided to team up. Up north, the Pendaz warriors were preparing themselves for a raid of the High Elves. Little did they know, this would be their last raid. The raiders descended on the small town, but little did they know, the Elvish army was ready. The raiders were obliterated. Within seconds, hundreds of arrows fell upon them. The elves, tired of the constant raids, attacked the Pendaz warriors, slaughtering their people and destroying their town. A mob of soldiers ran around, destroying house after house, rooting out any civilians hiding in them, and killing them. It didn't take too long for the end of the Pendaz warriors. The neighboring Orcish tribes, the Bloody Todadas and Duz, looked at this and thought, wow, we don't really like the elves. So, they teamed up against Sarone. The three armies collided. The Elvish army was stuck in the ruins of the town, and were quickly slaughtered by the hundreds of orcs. And when I say slaughtered, I don't mean they won. I mean they lost most of their soldiers. The rest of the Orcish tribes, seeing what was essentially a victory, as the Elvish army had been completely destroyed, decided that they would help against the Sarone elves and team up on them. A collection of every orc army landed in the middle of the Sarone capital city, ravaging the land, going head-to-head with the remains of the Sarone army. The Elvish army, using their superior bow capabilities, were able to kill most of the orcs. But, eventually, the orcs began to target the archers, killing every single one of them, and continuing to ravage the capital city. Sarone attempted to surrender, but the orcs were in no mood for that. They had just watched these men and women destroy an entire town of orcs, and now they wanted revenge. Each army moved separately throughout the city, destroying houses, killing civilians and soldiers. Eventually, a new Sarone army was implemented, and they met the raiders that were currently fighting in the north, and with their superior bows, were able to kill all of them. But the south continued to be ravaged by armies from multiple nations. The raiders met the army that had destroyed the other armies, and they quickly dispatched them. The remaining raiders targeted the larger structures in order to damage Sarone as much as possible, and they succeeded in destroying most of Sarone's civilian population, and nearly all of their soldiers. And if you thought Sarone was having a bad time now, the Hissy Kingdom decided that because of the fact that Sarone had stationed a large army inside of their borders, they would attack Sarone. Heavy fighting in the Hissy Kingdom resulted to many dead, but it also resulted in the destruction of the only remaining Elvish soldiers. Meanwhile, raiders continued to run rampant about the capital of Sarone, destroying houses, killing civilians, doing what an average Orcish raider does. Until finally, a Sarone army was sent to deal with and dispatch the last of the Orcish raiders. So now, Sarone was extremely damaged. They were open to any form of raids, and a new enemy in the east decided to exploit that. Although they did not have numbers, the dwarves had physical strength far beyond what the elves had, and so they attacked. They had very limited success when it came to it, but they killed a few civilians, which was just the statement they needed. It was an anti-Sarone statement. The elves quickly realized that they were not in a position right now to be a world power, so they retreated from the boundaries and complications of politics and simply attempted to rebuild. The High Side Kingdom, with intentions of continuing to attempt to unify the humans, attacked the Dobuk Imperium and the Holy Kalana. The humans not under the High Side Kingdom's rule were annoyed, as they had tarnished the reputation of the humans, as the humans before had the reputation of just being simple traders, peaceful, and quite nice, to be honest. But now, it was shown that the humans had a drive for conquest that not many else had. As they were distracted with defending their allies, the Holy Kalana were attacked, and much of their military was destroyed. And that was it. The Imperium had been conquered, and Kalana was not far behind. Their king, Yapa, realizing that it was not long until the collapse of the Holy Kalana, took a few of his biggest followers and fled. The land they fled to is still unknown, but they say it's a faraway land, full of scorching heat and desert. The Hissi forces were finally able to regroup and launched an attack on the remainders of the Kalana army, which weren't many now that the king had fled with his best soldiers. They knew it wouldn't be long until the conquering, and there it is. The humans are now united under one banner. Now that the High Side Kingdom has united all humans under its own banner, it has almost no threats, except the orcs uniting. And they're not the only ones who realize that. King Oko of the Hawk Knock also realizes that, and decides that he is going to set off on a unification of the orcs. And just a bit of conquering later, the Hawk Knock had conquered some of their neighbors. The reason I didn't show you that battle and the wars was because it wasn't that hard, as they didn't have very big armies. But the rest of the orcs had larger armies. But before they get to that conquering, it's time to focus on the High Side Kingdom a bit. King Luce of the High Side Kingdom saw the orcs attempting to unite and decided that he could not let that happen. And what better way to keep the orcs from getting strong than purging one of their largest settlements? For this war, they created an entire new type of strategy called purging, which meant to kill as many members of the population of the enemy state as possible. But that could only be done with defeating the military, so they focused on defeating the military first. The orcs showed strength that the humans did not expect, defeating their entire military and beginning to attack their settlement. The king then enlisted a large amount of civilians in an attempt to combat the numbers of the orcs, and it worked. They also sent multiple children to the front lines, which wasn't as good of a strategy, but hey, it worked for distraction. This orc general, known as Topduz, had killed many humans. He was leading a one-man campaign to kill as many humans as he could possibly find, and he was succeeding. This hurt the morale of the humans, and set back their plans for world domination by making it so the public distrusted the efficiency of the military. Duz was in shambles. The king had been killed. Humans were running amok, tearing down buildings, beating orcs to death. The remaining soldiers were all fighting, but being defeated. It wasn't looking good for them. They left the chaotic lands behind to a land they thought would be more peaceful. The previous human king had been killed in the fighting, and a new one, known as Egastia, ruled. He planned for conquest, and not like they had done before. World conquest is what he wanted. But he was not the smartest. He thought that by destroying a single orc village, he had quelled the entire orcish threat. But now he looked east, towards the dwarves. The dwarves were disunified people that had come from another land. The current situation in their small area was basically a tinderbox, with the match hovering just above it. And who better to be that match than the humans? They ignited a riot right in the middle of the Southern Kingdom, and, naturally, the Northern Kingdom was accused of starting this riot. So, they declared war. The Hawk Nock declared war on the Bloody Todidas in order to continue conquering the orcs. In a conflict caused by thought thievery of a lot of money, the High Kingdom and Sarone went to war. The High Kingdom's expansionist ideals died with their king, who had died charging an entire elvish army alone. Their new king was much smarter, and immediately upon getting his rule, he surrendered to the elves. But the damage was done. The High Kingdom would no longer be able to expand, as they had lost much of their military. Their kings, which had wanted to expand, and most of the support from their civilians. In their current state, they may have been able to get it back, but not after what happened next. Mass rebellion from those who thought that they had been cheated by the High Kingdom by not being allowed to conquer and expand. The Pemat Imperium, up higher, and Woogie all rebelled in order to attempt to overthrow the High Kingdom and its corruption and greed. Meanwhile, up north, the Southern Kingdom had taken over the Northern Kingdom, but they had learned of the High Kingdom's ploy to start the war between them. But they did not hold a grudge on the High Kingdom. They realized the fact that if that had not happened, they wouldn't have taken up the rest of the doors and wouldn't have unified. The Hawk Nock easily took over their rivals to the south, and were now preparing to continue attacking the High Kingdom. But first, they wanted to see what happened with the Civil War. The Pemat Imperium fell without much difficulty, but Woogie and up higher would be much harder to take. I just want to point out something. The king of Woogie was named Uwu. Oh my god. The Civil War seemed like it would never end. So, the new king of the High Kingdom decided to sign the peace treaty with both Woogie and Apir. But a new global conflict was forming. Not very long after a huge war that involved almost all of the nations, a world war was brewing. Agaor Mountain was now, due to their new king not being so forgiving of the High Kingdom for starting that riot all that time ago, wanted to declare war on them and both of their rebel states. Sarone wanted to declare war on the High Kingdom because they wanted to continue expanding, and Agaor Mountain because they were a huge block to their expansionist ideals. The Hawk Nock wanted to declare war on Aghag and the High Kingdom and Sarone because that would remove pretty much all remaining blocks they have from expanding to the rest of the continent. So, here's how that world war went. end to the war was not clear. Even throughout how the war had been going, the population of the world had increased. So now, headed by Saron, the nations agreed on a compromise. Every king would be put into a battle arena. The last king standing would win the war for his country. Little did everybody know, this was rigged towards the Elvish king. Only a few of the kings had full adamantine armor, and if you don't know, adamantine is the strongest material in the game. So many would not make it due to their lack of appropriate weapons and armor. Anyway, let's get on with the fight. The Elvish king immediately went after the dwarves, with one of the orc kings immediately killing multiple. Oh, well, that was a surprising outcome. The northern orcish king had an insta-kill weapon, which killed every single one of them. So yep, the winner of this conflict are these guys, because of an insta-kill weapon. But the Psy Kingdom, refusing to listen to anybody else, detonated a nuclear warhead on top of their own base in order to keep anybody from conquering it. Simultaneously at Aegor Mountain, right in the middle of their town, a nuclear warhead was detonated, which had been planted there hundreds of years earlier when a human had accidentally wandered into their territory. I say accidentally, but like with brackets around it because it wasn't accidental. So, this land, now scarred from nuclear use and war. I am really tired right now. I cannot talk well. Well, what'll happen to it? I might make a sequel to this, if requested. Anyway. Please subscribe and like the video, and also this is more like a test video than really like an official storytelling one. I'm just testing out the different strategies I can use for making a Worldbox story. I don't think this is that great, but let's see what the community thinks. Goodbye.